I have been politically active my whole life. I was involved in the struggle against the war in Vietnam, where the Americans killed 3 million people, in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, which was overthrown. And the Palestinians will also one day be victorious, as were the liberation movement in South Africa and in Vietnam and in Algeria and elsewhere. It's not the powerful people who can do the killing who end up successfully. If that were true, Algeria would still be French and the Americans would be ruling Vietnam. It's not true. It's the people who can accept, who can take and absorb the punishment and keep on fighting. And that suggests that it is the Palestinians who will emerge victorious from this struggle. But our job around the world is to try to reduce the cost by an amount that we'll never know through solidarity activity. And we are inspired by the Palestinian struggle for freedom against overwhelming odds, possibly the most uneven anti-colonial struggle in history. But that doesn't mean that the normal rules will not be honoured. It is the side which persists and is determined which will win, not the ones who can kill. That's the Israelis.
The 6 Palestinian prisoners' victory to free themselves in their own way through a tunnel they dug by a spoon shall be written down in history, not only history of the Palestinians, but history of all freedom fighters and the pro-justice people. Now we are going to talk about that with the representative of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Mr. Mick Napier from the UK. Welcome to the program, Mr. Mick Napier.
Thank you, Osama, for this invitation. It's a fantastic pleasure to speak to your viewers.
Mr. Napier, you posted in your Facebook that the success of the Palestinian 6 prisoners to free themselves through a tunnel made you happy. Why?
I think millions of people around the world, I think, danced with pleasure. Look, this isn't David versus Goliath. This is not just an act of self-liberation, as you say, but it's a real attack on Israel, because Israel sells its technology of repression around the world. They go everywhere saying, buy our technology because we can kill Palestinians easily from the air, from the ground, from the sea, and we can repress, we can keep them crushed. And then these 6 men with a rusty spoon hidden behind a poster embarrassed them and defeated them. And every decent person around the world was absolutely jubilant about this. We still go out to the 2 men who have not yet been thrown back into the dungeons, and our hearts are with them. But it was a moment of great joy.
Yeah, and we saw the Israeli occupation officials looking down the hole of the tunnel that the Palestinian prisoners had dug, and they were humiliated, as we saw. And we know that the Israelis always feel that they are superior to the Palestinian people, feel that the Palestinian people are subject to them. Now, this freedom operation by the Palestinian prisoners, how would it affect the colonizer relationship?
Well, you know, in a colonial situation, the colonizers, because they have such technological advantages, they think they don't need to understand the people whom they oppress, because they can defeat them by an iron wall, as the Zionists used to call it. And using technology, they don't need to negotiate. They don't need to talk to the Palestinians as equals, because technology will always keep them on top. That was their dream in Vietnam, in South Africa, in Ireland, in so many other colonial situations. And in every situation they were defeated, ultimately. So the great thing about the prisoners' victory is that you know that when you approach one of those Israeli checkpoint. They are sadistic, they're cruel, but it's very important for them to humiliate Palestinians. And here the humiliation was in the opposite direction. It was the powerful technological side that was humiliated. And you know, when you saw them looking into a hole in the ground, immediately, you know, humorists around the world started providing captions. They looked ridiculous, and it was a clear victory for one side, for the oppressed, and a clear defeat for the powerful technological side. Even if they recapture the other two, which will be very sad, it's still a victory. And that victory is on the record, and it cannot be expunged.
Yes, it's victory because it raised the spirit and the morale of all the Palestinian people, whether in the occupied land or in the diaspora. I want to ask you about the impact of that on the activists and the supporters of justice, not only for Palestine, but justice everywhere.
Everybody smiled. Everybody, when the subject came up, they had a big smile as wide as could be. And you know, normally when you talk about Palestine, you talk about resistance and heroism, but it's very bad news most of the time. Killings, torture, dispossession, burning trees, polluting the land with sewage and fire. And here was good news. Everybody was happy. Everybody who cared was an inch taller. And of course, it was because we knew the Zionists were an inch shorter. It was absolutely wonderful. It's impossible to measure general public opinion because that costs money and time. But you can be sure it shifted the balance against the Zionists, and it shifted the balance not just in favor of the people of Palestine, but all those who stand with them.
Yes, and Mick, when the Israeli occupation forces re-detained 4 of the 6 freed prisoners, they portrayed that to their people as a great victory by the Israeli police and the Israeli occupation soldiers. How Mick viewed that? Is it a victory that they were able to re-detain 4 of the 6?
The Zionist press, and you know it's not a victory. They're trying to minimize the defeat. The defeat is real, it's on the record, and it will always be there. But of course, if the 6 had made their way to Lebanon or to Egypt or to Jordan, this would have been an even bigger victory. But we hope the 2 will. But no, it's not a victory. They just try to reduce the of the defeat. And they know it's a defeat because this is a technological superpower defeated by 6 heroic men, 6 determined men, 6 ingenious men. And what's the technology? The technology was a spoon. They have nothing but their individual courage and intelligence against a brutal prison system. That was the joy of the victory.
Yeah, and Mick, you visited Jenin and particularly the refugee camp of Jenin, I think in 2002, and you met with Zakaria Zbedi and his family. And you know, all the Palestinian prisoners, the 6 of them are from the same area, from Jenin area. Now, when you heard of the news of this freedom freedom operation by those prisoners, what did you remember?
Well, I took many delegations to Palestine, Osama, before the Israelis put me and many other people in jail for a few days and then expelled us, forced us onto a plane. So I'm not able to go anymore. But I remember going to Jenin on that occasion. There were 21 of us. We traveled as 20 because it would fill 3 taxis exactly, would make it cheaper. But while we were exchanging greetings and friendships and making a promise to go back and repay the hospitality we have always received from Palestinians, some armed men came into the room. It was the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade people from the camp, and they were very unassuming. They were very humble.
Yeah, and
waved their weapons. But they invited us to join them for a meal that night, and we were very grateful indeed. We were overwhelmed by the generosity and the friendliness.
Yeah, and my last question to you, Mick, the rusty spoon used by the Palestinian prisoners to achieve their freedom overpowered the high tech of the Israeli security mechanisms. How would history talk about that, and how the future generations would learn about this very important event in the history of the revolution of the Palestinian people?
Who remembers the jail? Who remembers the men who were the guards in the prison for Nelson Mandela? Nobody. We don't remember the jailers. We don't remember these brutes. We remember the heroes. And these 6 men will undoubtedly be remembered for a very, very long time. They will be welcomed by people everywhere who value freedom and justice. And what can I say? We are all humbled. My government sells weapons to the Israelis. They know the people don't support this. But we are not yet strong enough to defeat the government on this issue. But we know that public opinion is with us, and we know the government knows this. So that's the challenge for us, Osama. And when things like this happen in Palestine, everybody is lifted. There will be defeats. You and your people have to pay a terrible price for freedom, but freedom will come. Who knows? The Palestinian flag is already a symbol of freedom and justice everywhere. People wave it. But maybe there will be room for a second flag. Will be a key and a spoon on it. Who knows, yeah?
Representative of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Mr. Mick Napier, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to our program.
It's an honor, Osama. Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. Thank you.